Trump as hero, Biden as victim god? Could Thiel's could Thiel's guru Rene Girard have written this script? The Monica Perez show starts now. I'm going to rattle off a few headlines for you. I'm just going to actually not even read headlines, just tell you what's been happening because after I tell you those few things, I'm going to dive headlong into this, the philosophical underpinnings of the whole Trump, Vance, Thiel continuum. I've just absolutely fallen down a rabbit hole since last time we spoke, and I have lots to tell you on this subject. Just a few things have happened since we last spoke. One of which is that Biden has dropped out of the race and put his weight behind Kamala. And I think that she was at didn't even pay attention. I think they anointed her or crowned her, coronated her, and she's going to be the candidate for the Democrats. Now, Biden hasn't been seen since he announced, or it was announced, that he had COVID-19, which kind of makes me crazy because is it still COVID-19? Is it a variant of COVID-19? Is it not COVID-24 by now? Anyway, he says he's going to address the country tomorrow from the Oval Office. Now, of course, that might be pre-recorded. I don't know. Let's see if he makes a real appearance. Another big thing that happened was there's a massive outage at CrowdStrike. It affected a lot of things, including really disrupting air travel. Of course, air travel has been in the crosshairs for a while now, but I would like to dive into that. I cannot really dive into that with all the stuff I have to do today. So maybe we'll do it Thursday, but I will give you a hint in case you want to do some homework on your own. Look up the World Economic Forum's Cyber Polygon, which is their scenario for a digital COVID or digital pandemic kind of thing. Also in the news today, the director of the Secret Service, Cheadle, she resigned finally. And if you watched my last show or one of my last shows last week, all the tweets that I've been tweeting over the years that the Secret Service was set up for an incompetence canard. So this is all part of that. I have not been paying much attention to the back and forth of what happened on July 13th. I'm moving on from that because I think it's much more important, A, things that are happening in the world, but B, what it means that there seems to, that these both symbolically and actually and for our future. So but there was one little thing that I noticed. As soon as Biden dropped out of the race, Trump reacted, crooked Biden was not fit to run. And as I've noticed from the beginning, and maybe you have too, crooks tried to kill Trump. So I always think that's weird when the names are weird. Anyway, and Trump has since been deified, but that too is the topic for another time. Okay, so I was on Johnny Vedmore's show on TNT yesterday, TNT Radio, and he asked, I didn't have a lot of time, 15, 20 minutes, but he asked a lot of questions that got me really digging into what's going on. And one of the things he asked is, what do you think of Biden resigning or dropping out of the race? And this mental deterioration stuff with Biden has been going on since like before 2020. It's been going on since the original campaign. And it really wasn't in evidence then. So the fact that it unfolded, progressed, it really fulfilled the predictive programming makes me think that that wasn't a prediction, it was a plot, and that this was what was supposed to happen. But I've had a hard time trying to figure out exactly why, because it seems to me that, was it leading up to this moment where he drops out of the race? Like, how specific did they have this thing teed up? I don't know. And is his dropping out of the race at this point, is that what is solidifying Trump's victory? Once the assassination attempt kind of shored him up, I didn't think they needed to do something this dramatic. Could it be that the purpose is for him to now also resign from the presidency and let Kamala Harris be the first woman president, the first Indian president? Like, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. People are calling for his resignation. They're even talking about the 25th Amendment, which would take him out of office. And actually, this is a great opportunity to set a precedent on how to use that because it's never been used. Of course, it would be bad. I don't know why Republicans are calling for that. It's worse to have an incumbent in to run against an incumbent, even if it's just for a brief amount of time. So, but that could be like what the kind of political purpose for this is. However, I I don't normally go in for like symbolic stuff or super deep thinking stuff, like the big philosophy issues. But when I started to try to understand JD Vance and his connection to Thiel and the significance of all of that, which was one of Johnny's questions, I had to get into some political movement stuff, some philosophy stuff. So I made a lot of progress on figuring out the JD Vance thing, and it's really much bigger than just him since the last time we spoke. And hat tip to Burnin' Beard, who sent me, he actually started me out on this path to this deep dive by sending me a very comprehensive article in Vanity Fair magazine from 2022. Obviously, I don't trust any like mainstream media like The Atlantic or Vanity Fair. I mean, not my politics for sure. And I don't trust it anyway. It's always there for a reason, these articles. But this was very well written, comprehensive article. So I take the politics with a grain of salt, but it raises a lot of important issues and brings out a lot of just quotes from interviews he did with these people. So it covers Vance, Masters, who is the Arizona guy who wasn't as successful as Vance, but he's in this crowd, Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, a lot of people. It's what the author calls neo-reactionaries. So I started thinking about, I mean, I have so many notes on this article. Like I was tempted to spend today with you, like reading the article and making the comments of like, because it brings up so many critical issues. And I might actually do that on Thursday if you would be patient enough to allow it, because it's fascinating and it brings up so many really interesting points and threads to pull on. But I don't think I'll get a chance to pull too many quotes from that article. But it got me thinking about the 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 impact, the influence that tech seems to be having on this neo-reactionary new right thing. Like they bankroll it. But at the same time, the new right thing is about like reinstituting conservative values and a lot of stuff that seems very anti-tech. This reminds me of some of the stuff from the 60s, and I'm going to get to that, where people were homesteading, but they were also tech savvy back then. So I think this is a reflection. I think they're remaking that. And that 60s stuff was CIA. And I think this stuff is CIA. And you start with what's called the PayPal mafia, the big tech guys who are involved in culture. Elon Musk all of a sudden is throwing tons and tons of money. Is it like $45 million a month behind Trump? Peter Thiel has been a supporter of Vance since the very beginning. I'm going to get into that. And I think these guys, these tech guys, get rich the exact same way as George Soros and for the same reasons. So George Soros got rich by front running the British pound. And people are like, he's a genius. He can ride the wave. But if he had inside information, I mean, I'm not positive, but if you have inside information on what the government policymakers are thinking, you have an advantage in front running exchange rates. And these guys, from the subsidies at Tesla to the fact that Facebook was basically a CIA operation, I mean, these guys got rich also kind of through government action. And they use their money for political ends. And it was funny to me because as we go through this labyrinth, it's going to be kind of hard to the story unfolds. I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but Peter Thiel was a philosophy major. George Soros was a philosophy major and a PhD in philosophy, or at least a master's. He got graduate work in philosophy. So these guys are political change agents. In my opinion, they got rich using with government help. They're philosophy majors. They really understand this big picture. And this is a top-down cultural shift based on philosophical beliefs that are tested by psychiatrists and stuff. Like this stuff is real, whether we like it or not. It's part of the manipulation. Karl Popper was Soros's guru. Karl Popper's thing was it's called like the Open Society and Its Enemies, and it talks about tribalism. And Soros has basically, I mean, it coincides with Soros's power that we have finally adopted tribalism in this country, which we were a consumer tribe. Like we didn't have these other tribes, and now we have tribalism, and I blame him. But Thiel's gurus are Leo Strauss and Rene Girard. And I'm not sure people have heard of both of these guys. I certainly heard of Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss is the neocon idol. So the Crystals, Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol, they love Leo Strauss. And Leo Strauss has an idea, or Kristol says stuff that very much reflects Rene Girard's ideas. So I don't know how much they overlap. Leo Strauss's stuff, from what I understand, is obscure. Like he wouldn't even write down everything he thought. You had to go hang out with him and talk to him. Kind of reminds me of the Grateful Dead a little bit. They didn't do a lot of massive touring. They didn't let a lot of PR. They wanted to just prance from town to town and involve people personally. But I'm going to read a quote from Irving Kristol's book, Neoconservatism, the Autobiography of an Idea. And this reflects, I think, a kind of nexus between Strauss and Girard. And I'm getting to where Girard's theory is at the heart of what I think happened over the past week. I'm going to get to that next. Let me just read this one quote. The American people know, their common sense tells them that foreign policy is a subject, economic policy is another, about which they know little, and that their opinions are not reasoned opinions, only shallow attitudes that are waiting to be shaped or reshaped into firm opinion. That shaping is the task of political leadership, which has to lead, to make decisions, and then be judged by the results. The kind of timid deference to supposed popular opinion now visible in Washington's elites only serves to diminish popular confidence in their wisdom and their competence. Okay? That, to me, reflects this Girard's theory. Girard's theory is that all of our desires it's called memetics. You might have heard of memetics. Girard's theory is memetics. And it's not like memetics. It's not about memory or memes or any of that. It's about mimicry. It's mimetics. It's about mimicry. And it's that the idea that all of our desires have been adopted because we were told to desire them, or that desire for them was modeled by either an elite or something closer to a peer, which I forget what the peer is, maybe called a mediator. I don't know, but it matters a little bit, like who is modeling the behavior, if it's somebody on high or somebody at your level. But so he's saying that all of our desires are from that. Kristol's saying that that the job of the elite is to shape your desires. So it's exactly the same to me. But Girard has a second element to his theory. And that is the need for a scapegoat. The need for a scapegoat. He says that that the whole system is a triangle. There's the subject, which is me, you, the model who tells you what to desire, and then the object of desire. And because you both desire the same thing, it creates a kind of conflict, a competition, jealousy, envy. And that creates like a violence. And the only way, I'm telling you, this is what he said. Like, I'm not even sure I understand why this is the only way, but he says it is the foundation of all religions. Everything primitive arises from this. The only way to resolve that conflict and have peace is to, I think it's basically the violent death of a victim who then becomes a god for the sacrifice that he made. Now, I don't know if he was just looking at Jesus and making all of this up to diminish Jesus's sacrifice, but Abraham and Isaac has that sacrificial element, and I'm sure he has lots of other examples. He says every single religion has this as a foundation. So, here's a quote from, I think this is actually Wikipedia about Girard's philosophy, but this is about the scapegoat thing. The scapegoat mechanism has one requirement for it to be effective in restoring the peace. All participants in the removal of the scapegoat must genuinely believe that he is guilty. It is also essential that the scapegoat cannot strike back afterwards, so it is common for him to be killed. Once he is gone, peace will quickly be restored, further confirming his guilt. And he says the scapegoat is chosen arbitrarily. I don't understand that. The resulting peace is born from violence, and this form of violence, controlling violence, has existed since the beginning of civilizations. So this is what I was thinking. Like, then I started thinking maybe Biden will die. Maybe you're not going to see him again. And then that was before this, like, where's Biden meme arose. So I'm really wondering slash concerned that this really is the end for Biden. I actually talked about that on Vedmore's show yesterday, and the fact that the sacrifice ultimately is appreciated. So the victim becomes a hero or a god. So I expect the lionizing of Biden to happen immediately. And I actually so I said that to Johnny Vedmore. And after that, I forget where I saw it. There was an article that literally said why Biden is the best living president. And then I joked, I was like, is he the only living president? But he's not. There's Carter, Bush, Obama, Clinton. So the lionization has begun as far as I'm concerned. Another thing that's very interesting about the fact that Biden, in this scenario, if Biden is the scapegoat, that his death, the end, like, I'm talking about a symbolic death here, but it could be a real one, eventually, is the death of an epoch, because he was the youngest congressman. He's maybe, not the longest serving person in Washington, but he started in, I think, 72. So he's been there. This is I forget what they call those chunks of, we're like in the fourth constitutional era or something. But like this, I think they're trying to usher in the end of the previous era. And this would symbolize that very seriously. Here's another thing that I thought was weird. Girard also says that the sacrifice can be deferred. So I was wondering if maybe the assassination attempt or whatever it was is a deferred sacrifice, and that actually Trump ultimately will be sacrificed, because that's what I was worried about. Like, I think the assassination attempt was staged, but that doesn't mean I don't think that they won't actually come at him, or something bad won't I don't want anything bad to happen to him, but I actually am now worried, because I don't like those. I don't want anything to do with those mass trauma events. They're awful, and they absolutely change culture completely. So I don't want anything to do with that. I'm not trying to speak it into existence. Awful. But I think as far as that's concerned, a couple of more little items from Girard would be helpful. These characters, desiring the being of the mediator, project upon him. So like us, whatever, project upon the mediator or the model superhuman virtues, while at the same time depreciating themselves, making him a god while making themselves slaves in the measure that the mediator is an obstacle to them. I don't really understand that part. But so that's what's happening with Trump. It's a cult of personality. It's worship, it's adoration, and it fits the bill. And here it says the social position of king, for instance, begins as the victim of the scapegoat mechanism, which may have been true for Trump, January 6th, whatever, though his sacrifice is deferred and he becomes responsible for the well being of the whole society. So deferred does not mean avoided. So, anyway, if he were then also to be sacrificed, but he was the king, that would make way for Vance and Usha to take the White House, which I think is a very real possibility. I also think a couple of things, words of caution. One, July momentum rarely carries through to November. That's why October surprises happen in October. So I wouldn't be totally confident that there isn't another shoe to drop. And I also think that you can't always predict the outcome, because I feel like this mosaic that is being created, there may be a left and a right. I'll tell you what I think they may actually entail, but either way, the mosaic, not much would change on the overall mosaic that is being constructed. And the way I look at it is the mosaic is being constructed by puzzle pieces or tiles or whatever. You've got one pile on the left and you've got one pile on the right. And you can only draw from one pile at a time, but it doesn't really matter which section of the mosaic you work on, it's coming together. And that's how I think about whether they have a Democrat winning or a Republican winning. So they have different plans, I think, different scenarios, and then they anticipate how to make the most of a scenario to get to that same ultimate goal. It's like that Hack Attack or Lockstep, the 2010 Rockefeller Foundation document about this different scenarios that could lead to, furthering the technocratic era, really. And people noticed the Lockstep one because it really reflected the COVID scenario. Okay, so if there is a left or a right in the technocracy, what might it be? And the way I'm thinking of it is, the way there was fascism versus communism. Fascism was like national socialism. Communism was international socialism. And I think it may still be that. That may be the real tension. So the globalist international multipolar world order would be the left, the World Economic Forum and the Democrats and the woke stuff, whatever. But the right, and this is what I'm beginning to see, and this is what I see when I look into the Thiel stuff. The right is I know it sounds crazy, but it would be a military-based techno monarchy. So that was a joke, like in the Vanity Fair thing, like Curtis Yarvin and the guy were joking back and forth, like, what do you envision? He's like, kind of like a monarchy, And then when Vance says, like, take out the middle, or Yarvin says, like, rage, remove all government employees, they're not talking about restoring the 9th and 10th Amendment. They're not talking about decentralization or restoring states' rights. I think they're talking about, like, highly centralized. And Thiel, Strauss talk about lack of transparency. There's too much transparency. We don't want transparency. That folds into that open AI thing I was talking about, where they're like, our access to AI should stop right here. And the government, the military, should control it from there on in. And open AI should be a crime. I feel like that's part of what these guys are talking about. And the way it all came together is hat tip to James for sending me Das Netz. It'll all be in the show notes, monicaperezshow.com. This documentary made by Germans in German about the Unabomber, but they started back in the 60s, and they talked to the merry pranksters who were definitely CIA people handing out acid, the acid test. One of the merry pranksters was Stuart Brand, who later founded the Global Business Network, which was the author of that 2010 technological, 2010 Rockefeller Foundation thing with Hack Attack and Lockstep. So it's weird how this stuff all comes together. But he said, and I'm going to play the clip later in the show, he said that the greatest legacy of the 60s, the only legacy of the 60s, I think he might have said, was how the cultural change that they had implemented gave people a sense of sharing and communalism, which allowed the kids who were hacking and messing around with computers, it got them to contribute all their work free. And when you think about it, the Merry Pranksters, the Grateful Dead, all that was out of Palo Alto. Stanford, Siri, Stanford Research Institute is all out of Palo Alto. So they got all these computer nerds to get free lovey and give it all away. And that is how they very quickly crowdsourced. This is me figuring it out. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think it sounds right. They got it. They crowdsourced it all that way. And so they encouraged LSD for kind of reprogramming. They encouraged off the grid living. But they also encouraged computers and hacking and sold them in their little magazines with goats. They also had like computers. It was really clever. And now you might notice that psychedelics are making a big comeback, and it could be for a similar reason. They're just as an aside, I thought something interesting. Now I'm probably going to go long, but just as an aside, I found it interesting that this is about the Unabomber. They talk about Henry Murray, who was the guy who MK Ultra'd the Unabomber at Harvard. He was decorated for writing a book called Assessment of Men for the military. And and when I saw that, that rang another bell or little light bulb, because I had thought that JD Vance really had hadn't written a book. He hadn't made a movie, hadn't done anything, didn't know Thiel, none of that before he went to Yale Law School. And then his trajectory was straight up. It was crazy. Thiel got him his first job out of Yale Law School. Peter Thiel got some fresh faced guy. I mean, it was weird. And he ushered him through the whole way, got him more jobs, funded his venture capital, funded his senatorial race, all of that. And I had the thought that when Vance was in the military, they probably give everybody, I don't know if anyone was a Marine here, but they probably give everybody an IQ test and a psych test. And they identified him. My guess is they identified him right away, put him in the media relations group in the Marines, and he was scripted from there. That's my feeling. Okay, so another thing about that, so I'm looking into this Merry Prankster thing, the counterculture, they included like the authors and artists, the counterculture in the 60s, which was, definitely coordinated. And there are plenty of links to the CIA. And a lot of the stuff that it said in this Vanity Fair article reminded me of that. Lower Manhattan, it's avant-garde to wear a cross, to convert to Catholicism. They fund arts. They fund cinema. So JD Vance has the book. He has the movie, which gets him money, and it gets him to write his own legacy. But it also shapes the culture. It shapes the counterculture. I mean, I know this is a lot. I just it just started cascading down, and I couldn't outrun it. Anyway, so but this Vanity Fair article basically says the upshot is that this new right, and I'm sure there are people who are absolutely versed in this, and I'm getting this from Vanity Fair, which I know is not going to fairly represent your opinions of it. So I've been dialoguing with people on Twitter and stuff at Monica Perez Show. Please feel free to post stuff. I'll read it. This is an ongoing educational process. But the article says that they reject liberalism in both sense of the words, both like laissez-faire economics and being a liberal. Libertinism, they want conservative morals, which is very hard to believe from this crowd. And libertarianism, they reject that as well because they say that's what got us into this mess in the first place, basically, is that laissez-faire economics. So the other thing is the arts and the authorship and the cinema and stuff, that shapes men's minds just the way Girard and Strauss say that people have to be shaped. It shapes your desires. And there's something, I don't accept it totally. It really, it degrades the idea of like, the first thing you learn in the Baltimore Catechism is I am a creature composed of body and soul, made to the image and likeness of God, not made to desire what I'm told to desire by movies. So I don't accept it, but there's definitely some actionable truths in it. So now, like, I was left with the feeling that the purpose of all this is not the like overt purpose of the people who subscribe to this philosophy. And of course, like if there weren't real problems, you wouldn't have countercultural movements, of course. So I think they create the problems to generate the countercultural movements. But all that aside, I'm just telling you what I think this is all about. The idea is that the PayPal mafia or whatever wants a techno monarchy. So the techno part, I mean, they're funding the new right stuff. So they're in on that. They're all tech guys. So it's totally tech. Vance, I'm going to read to you. I'm going to stop for comments and then I'm going to read to you the stuff that Vance has invested in. But yeah, so the techno stuff, they're obviously techno, and the monarchy stuff is maybe it's a joke, maybe it's shorthand. They say stuff like dictatorship, but that's what I think they mean when they say take out the middle in government, leave the top. They want control. I gotta tell you, I know this is going to go long today, but I gotta tell you about Thiel's work on his essay called The Straussian Moment. Very, very interesting. So let me just finish. If you can give me one more minute, I'm just going to rattle off the investments in the Thiel Vance VC fund, which is called Nuria, which is a funny name. Thiel says everybody has to use this random name generator and to generate a name out of Narnia randomly. And Vance's was Nuria, which is fiery red, and I think it's the ring. It's the ring. We're talking about Narnia here, which also co-ops the Catholic, structure, even though that was C.S. Lewis, who wasn't exactly Catholic, but close. Nuria was described as having the power to inspire others to resist tyranny, domination, and despair, as well as having the power to hide the wielder from remote observation and giving resistance to the weariness of time. It's also thought to have magical properties and firepower. So Vance happened to get the name that symbolized resisting tyranny, domination, and despair. Isn't that convenient? And have I mentioned that Thiel, Musk, I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so here are some of the things they're working on. Kriya is gene therapy redefined. This is Vance's VC firm bankrolled by Thiel. Gene therapy, True Anomaly, which provides space security for the Space Force. Amplify Bio, which does clinical drug trials. Maybe that's why he has such a strong feeling about being pro-vax. Value Base, which is automated real estate valuation for property tax and other purposes. I imagine if you want to use eminent domain, it would be great to control that. Strive, which he owns with Vivek. It's about focusing on shareholders, not stakeholders, which in theory I am in favor of. Chapter, which is automated help so you can maximize your Medicare usage. So just, whatever, promoting welfare. or social services, which a libertarian like myself would never do. Acre trader, which is commodifying farmland. I wonder what Courtney Turner has to say about that. Sounds like natural asset companies. Atomic industries combining technology and manufacturing to create a world where the world of atoms can move at the speed of bits. Rumble. Thanks for that. I like Rumble. I mean, people are worried, but I got to take some of this stuff off as soon as I post it on YouTube. So it's better than that. Hallow, which is a prayer app, which I actually have because I don't think I use it. But I was trying to, I'm terrible at saying the rosary. I wanted to remember how to say the rosary, like the mysteries. Anyway, I use something else, but I did download that. And then Branch, an insurance company that promises low rates, which does sound good. But let me just tell you, you've been noticing like auto and home insurance has had a lot of news. They're canceling people. They're making things difficult for you. And I do wonder if it's because they don't want you owning homes or autos anymore. So who knows what's going on with the insurance industry. And here's the last thing I'll say before we go to comments. According to the New York Times, I just read an article today. Trump made the decision to choose Vance 1 month ago at a dinner at the home of David Sachs, who is an acquaintance and supporter of Vance. David Oliver Sachs, born in 1972, is a South African American entrepreneur, author, and investor in internet technology firms. This guy's South African. Thiel spent time as a child in South Africa. Musk is from South Africa. Hunter Biden's wife and handler is from South Africa. I think she's the handler. I mean, the South Africa thing, something is up with that. And I first read about it in Ole Damagard's coup d'etat in slow motion about the assassination of Olaf Palme. I did not realize, I don't know if like South Africa is a CIA outpost or what is going on there, but it is suspect. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this conversation right after our comments. So I do have the help of my producer actually curated the comments because I knew this would be a very long show and I don't want to have to read them all. So I'm just going to not read them first. Here we go. Eric says, which Biden are we talking about? The one with or without earlobes? Yeah, maybe they all got to go. Jack says, my YouTube ads have been flooded with Harris ads since Biden dropped out. Act blue. Thiel and Vance are total real spooks. Yes, of course. Of course. Vance was tapped by the CIA. Why did I not see that? I'm speculating, but when I was like, they identified him in the Marines. Yes, of course. They brought him in. Of course they did. Funny. Okay. Snobby Bobby says apparently Biden was sighted today boarding Air Force One. All right. Burning Beard, staged actually works better as a mimetic. Feel free to explain that. If not to me here in Twitter, because Burning Beard is the one who told me about all this or sent me all the links that I had to then absorb in rapid fire manner. Jack says, what is the point of the quote support from people like Musk? Are we to believe our vote actually counts? Why throw money at Trump if all these created people are inserted regardless of public consent? That's very interesting. You know, that is a very good point. And I would say that one big part of it is, you know, I was wondering if I was playing a role here because, right, I'm laying out all the backstory for how this thing got so big and so powerful, and it maybe this is a facade. But my answer to your question is yes. Elon Musk throws money at him to make it look like that is the way you take control of the process. He doesn't just, you know, cross his fingers and make a wish. Like he has to actually get out there and you actually have to have Harris ads. But yeah, so I mean, but I don't know who they would be shielding. I mean, it's the CIA bringing this into the military complex with no transparency. But I guess, I mean, I don't for a second think that like Thiel and Elon are like consulting their own thoughts and consciences, and that's why they're doing all this. They too were created persons. And so this is all that thing. And where are we not looking? Netanyahu's in Washington right now. And a lot of this stuff comes from the authoritarian personality and all that. So, maybe there is an Israel connection that this stuff is meant to obscure. I don't know. Burnin' Beard says the money is to sell ideas and narratives, not to elect candidates. Excellent point. That's where the art comes in, the books, the movies, commercials, everything. Yes, yes. Renee says, I think they grab the money while they can still pass it off as money. Meanwhile, we get poorer. Money is a big, big part of it. I mean, that is why I think Usha, why they want Indian connections is to get just money for sure. And the more I read about the corruption, when we do the Danny Casolaro books, it's just obviously about money. Biden stuff, obviously about money. Siri, Stanford Research Institute, also the Siri on your phone, not a coincidence, is a CIA cutout, which makes the connection to 60s counterculture. Absolutely true. Yes, thank you. Changing images of man also comes out of Siri. I forget what that is. Yes, frightening me. Siri is named after the Stanford Research Institute. Isn't that funny? Renee says Navy and Marines still do the psych battery to figure out what special unit to plug you into. We also had the great purge of COVIDs. Man, yeah. See the power of crowdsourcing information? It's powerful. But I have to say, the censorship, the just lockdown of ideas that's happened this week, the past week or two is chilling. I mean, it's weird. It's definitely getting weird out there. Okay. So, yes, this was something that came up. Palantir, which is one of Thiel's companies, it was invested originally by In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA, whatever, VC. It's so unconstitutional. They had their board meeting this year in Tel Aviv, and they are fully behind helping Israel win this so-called war. And then I had the thought that war and fear of war is what ushers in one world government or a techno-military dictatorship. And on that thought, I had that thought, wrote that down before I went and dug in. I think Burnin' Beard sent me another article. I think it might have been him from eFlux, but that reflected kind of Thiel's 2004 essay called The Straussian Moment, which I did not get through. I didn't even get through that whole eFlux article, but what I saw explains a lot. He says, he just opens by saying 9/11 demonstrates the need for a unilateral, basically techno-military advancement, less freedom. It's the Straussian moment. And I think what he's saying, I didn't get through it, but I think what he's saying is that this is what Strauss anticipated. But it's the Straussians in PNAC who did 9/11. So they, in my opinion, and I think plenty of evidence supports that. You're welcome to do your own research. But they did what I hate, which is, they did what they did for their reasons. But in their own minds, they probably think they did it, but it was inevitable anyway. And we need to get ahead of this. And I hate that. I hate it when someone proves a point with a lie. They want to prove the nature of the world with a lie, and they justify it to themselves because they're so confident that they're right. But in my opinion, that proves that they are wrong. Of course, they were wrong to do that. That's awful. But I mean, even just philosophically, it's disgusting and it lacks integrity. And I don't know if they know that about themselves because they're very arrogant. Strauss advocates less transparency. All those things. That is who Thiel is. And Irving Kristol, who is the consummate Straussian, he bankrolled Thiel's newspaper at Stanford when I think Thiel was still just an undergrad. It was 1987, so he must have been, called the Stanford Review. So he was, I mean, how did he know Crystal? Probably the South Africa thing. I don't know what Crystal has to do with South Africa, but South Africa seems to be a place where they have petri dishes breeding created persons. The efflux, I'll read the paragraph from the efflux and then we'll get to the clips. In his contribution to the 2004 conference Politics and Apocalypse, dedicated to the French theorist and anthropologist René Girard, Peter Thiel wrote that 9/11 marked the failure of the Enlightenment heritage. Again, I wonder what Courtney has to say about that. The West needed a new political theory to save itself from a new world configuration open to a global terrorism that operated outside of all the norms of the liberal West. They need, granting in advance that the West had embodied the doctrines and values of democracy and equality, Thiel moved immediately to argue that these had made the West vulnerable. And I don't blame Thiel. I mean, I don't think Thiel is the mastermind here or Trump or anybody else, but I'm just telling you, that's what they're marching towards. And it's possible that at this point, what I'm talking about here, because I'm reading about this stuff in Vanity Fair and New York Times, that this is going to be the fear mongering of the left, and that doesn't make it not true. The things that you're afraid of are probably real, and they weaponize these fears. They weaponize stereotypes, prejudices. They weaponize the fears of this and that. They talk about it in the report from Iron Mountain. Have a world police force to make people more loyal to the national one, So I still have to figure out what all this means, but I think it's interesting to understand where they're coming from. And I believe that they are true believers for the most part. Like if this is like a fake out, I don't think Thiel knows. He thinks he's in the 9th layer of hell already. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, oh, by the way, given how censored and deplatformed and everything I'm experiencing, I always have the loyal support of True Hemp Science, and I have not given them a shout out in a long time. So if you are a CBD user or CBD curious, there is no chance there is a better CBD product or line of products than True Hemp Science. So if you want them, I only even give them plugs because I like the CBD that they send me. They don't send me money or anything. So if you want a little bonus, just write Monica in the promo code and check it out, truehempscience.com. The gummies are great. Great. Okay. So I think I'm going to do this out of order of what I originally planned. I want to get to the Merry Prankster guy, but something in that Vanity Fair article, I reread it this morning and at the same time got a DM from Andrew with a video from Elon Musk talking to Jordan Peterson. So I don't know if you've seen that yet, but here's the quote from the Vanity Fair article, which was written in 2022. Apparent laissez-faire. This apparent, I took it out of context. It starts with this apparent laissez-faire obscures somewhat the intense focus that some people in this world have on trans issues, or what they might say is the media's intense focus on trans issues, one of a suite of, quote, mimetic viruses. Remember that, mimetic viruses, as Kashuta, the podcaster, put it. 2022, this was written. That spread a highly individualistic liberal culture that is destructive to traditional ways of life. So now let's see what Elon said yesterday.
I see. So that's
so I was tricked into doing this, and it wasn't explained to me that puberty blockers are actually just sterilization drugs. Anyway, And so I lost my son, essentially. So, they call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
All right. So the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there's lots of people in that situation now.
Right.
It's not pretty, and lots of demolished kids.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good reason to be the final straw. All right, so let's.
So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that, and we're making some progress.
Join the club.
Yeah.
So he was tricked during COVID. He said that he was told his son would kill himself and that he was tricked into consenting to allowing his son to transition to a female. And because of that, he wants to kill the woke mind virus. But if this crowd was talking about it, maybe Elon is not known to be associating with those guys. It's hard to believe because the connection seems so deep. It's also hard to believe that he would fall for that. I mean, we were all talking about that stuff, and he was on the vanguard of, culture and that kind of thing. So it's hard for me to believe that his explanation is true. So I'd be interested in what the real explanation is. Okay, so now, and that just came out yesterday. So like these things are all coming together. It's really weird. So let's go to, these are two clips from this Das Nets. Again, thanks, James, who's here. These are from this documentary. It's about Ted Kaczynski, although I'm not even finished with it yet. I haven't gotten to that. But this stuff about the merry pranksters, this is Stuart Brand. He was a merry prankster. He was also in the Global Business Network, which writes these futurism scenarios. This is what he had to say.
But it didn't play out very far. It was basically a different kind of dead end from what drugs were. Whereas some of the technology, some of the alternative energy technology showed real promise. Solar energy basically took off gradually and takes off to this day. Computer technology, obviously. And because the counterculture hippie frame of reference was there for outlaws of all kinds, it basically swept right through the outlaw computer people, hackers, and became their frame of reference in a kind of a gift economy optimistic approach, became then the basis for personal computer software, then the internet and the web, and on and on. And that's the main legacy from the 60s, as far as I'm concerned, is the open system approach to everything having to do with computers.
So that's what he says is the main legacy. And that magazine was a magazine that he had started back in the 60s that had like heirloom seeds, which is what we would call them today, goats, goat herding manuals, computer parts, Okay, so one more clip I got for you.
The initial ARPA programs were all space related, not computer research by and large. Then in 1960, NASA was formed, and by Kennedy.
I don't think that's true. I think NASA was formed. First of all, Kennedy wasn't president in 1960. So I think NASA was formed earlier than that.
And the ARPA space programs were all transferred to NASA. That left ARPA, by 61, 62, it left ARPA an opportunity to do some other things. And one of the things they decided to get into was computer research.
So the ARPA thing, yeah, so that's what they were doing at that time. And then they spawned this thing where it was, maybe I should have flipped those, where this counterculture that they created in the 60s was all about sharing, was about not having private property. And it greatly accelerated the development of these technological tools. And in this book I have, Surveillance Valley, it talks about how this stuff all started to really come together during the Vietnam War. And it's amazing how far back it goes, but that's how you get, like, the defense industry was in California, all of that. And I think what we're seeing right now is a continuation of that, and a way to try to make this, it's the techno military complex now, and they're just still trying to mask that it's a military operation, in my opinion. But like I said, this is absolutely working theory. I'm getting educated on this every day, thanks to y'all, by the way. So, and just so you know, the only way anyone is going to join us is if you share the show, because I just think that just seems like the whole mediaverse is reshuffling right now. So please, if you like the show, share the show. And I'll see you Tuesday. If you want to hang out live, Tuesday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, on best places are Rockfin, Rumble. I'm also still sending it to Twitter and YouTube. A lot of times I have to take it right off of YouTube. But if you just want to listen to it as a podcast, it pops up a couple of hours after that on Tuesdays and Thursdays on the Monica Perez Show feed on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye, everybody.